Hey, what's up guys, it's Kelly and today I'm reviewing House of Earth and Blood, book 1 in the Crescent City series by J Maas. If you find yourself enjoying this video then please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, it really helps me out, and if you're new here and would like to see more of me then please subscribe. You would have to be really new here not to know that I love J Maas. I have done full reviews of the entire ACOTAR series to date, where I matched my lipstick to the book cover, so I've done the same thing today. I also did a review for Kingdom of Ash. I really love J Maas. She's one of my favourite authors, easily, and when this book was announced I was like, yes, I am ready for my queen to give me an adult fantasy, but also, like, how is this actually going to be any different from anything she already writes, you know, because she writes some pretty adult sexy times, she doesn't shy away from violence, and by the time Throne of Glass ended I feel like it could stand up against an adult fantasy series just based on the complexity of the world, like the intricacies of the plot and the magic system and the politics, and our queen has done some good stuff in her time, but from about 2 chapters into this book, I was like, yes, wow, okay, I get it. Where Throne of Glass, I feel, grew into an exceptionally wonderful and intricate high fantasy series, this just from the get-go was like, you're on your own, kid. I'm gonna tell you shit, and you have to remember it, and you have to absorb it, and you have to make sense of it in your mind. You are not gonna get spoon-fed stuff like you did in the other series, and I loved it. So before I carry on waxing lyrical about how fantastic the fantasy side of this was, I suppose I should just tell you guys a bit about the book. So this book follows Bryce Quinlan, who is a half-fae young woman, and at the start of this book something very traumatic happens to her. Someone very close to her is murdered, and it's kind of assumed that they know who did it. That person gets jailed, and Bryce can go on, like, living her life, you know? Until a few years later, this person who's been jailed for the murder is still in jail, but the murders start up again with the same MO, same things are happening, and they realise that something bigger is at play here. Because Bryce was so close to that original murder, she gets asked to help law enforcement investigate, and she gets assigned the hunky brooding angel Hunt Athalar to protect her, but also to help her investigate so that they can catch the person who really is responsible for these murders and put a stop to them. This takes them all through Crescent City to a variety of sleazy spots dealing with a variety of sleazy characters as they try to solve these murders. But there is so much more than that going on in the world as a whole. So up until now, J Maas has pretty much exclusively focused on fae. I mean, she's brought other creatures in. Obviously we had witches in Throne of Glass, and we've had shapeshifters in Throne of Glass, but for the most part fae are her thing, and she's really expanded the variety of magical creatures that she features in this book. So we've got humans, we've got fae, we've got witches, we've got shifters, we've got vampires, we've got angels. I know that there are 7 beings and I can never remember the last one, but basically all of these groups together, each of them has a representative on, like, the council, so all of these groups together are helping to run this region of the world. So Hunt is an angel, which I think I said, but he is actually a fallen angel, so he is enslaved to the higher up archangels. He rebelled against them and has now been enslaved, and his primary motive for agreeing to help Bryce is that he's essentially paying off a debt while he is enslaved, and if he agrees to help Bryce and they actually solve this case, his debt will be reduced significantly and he'll finally be able to earn his freedom. Bryce also has quite a big secret. It's no secret that she is half fae, but her father is quite a significant player in the realm of the fae, and exactly who her father is a secret. she doesn't want people to know that he is as important as he is. Bryce and Hunt both have quite a lot of trauma in their past, and one of the things that I love about Sarah J Maas is the way that she depicts characters dealing with trauma and the way that she depicts them learning to heal from trauma. Her focus on mental health is phenomenal and not something that we see nearly enough of in fantasy. It's one of the reasons that I love her books so much, because I just love that there's such a mental health focus. I mean, it's one of the reasons that ACOTAR means so much to me, is just the way that mental health is portrayed in that series. Like, I relate to it so strongly. It's one of the reasons that I want a Night Court tattoo, so that every time I look at it I can think of like Rhys saying, never feel guilty about the things that bring you joy, and, you know, more saying, you're always going to have hard days, don't let the hard days win. And I love her so much. There is a lot of friction between the different types of beings, so the archangels and vampires and fae and shifters and humans really don't get along. The witches are kind of just like there and chilled and okay with everyone. The witches seem to primarily be healers, which is awesome, and they're just like, we help everyone. But yeah, the other groups can be very antagonistic, so there's a lot of conflict between all of the different races. But yeah, basically just from like the first couple of chapters of this book, as they started introducing the geography of the world and the politics of the world, it instantly felt different to anything that we have ever seen from her. It is so much more complex than the likes of ACOTAR, obviously, because that is basically just a romance series with like some plot just to keep things interesting, and it is even so far beyond what we've seen in Throne of Glass. It's so complex and so intricate, and I'm so excited to see how she expands the world. And there were a couple of moments where something would happen and I'd have to like refer back to the beginning of the book, because I couldn't remember exactly how that portion of the society was set up and like how that worked. And, you know, I had moments where I got a little bit confused and I had to like set my mind to rights and figure out what was going on again, and that was so exciting for me. Having seen what she can do, I'm just amazed. Like, she's a great writer and she's a great storyteller, but I was so wowed by the complexity of this, and just I'm so in love with this world. I read this and for weeks afterwards just wanted to read it again, because I just wanted to be back in this world. Like, I want to live in Crescent City. So the world building is phenomenal. It is an urban fantasy, which is another way that it's completely different to anything that we've seen from her, and the way that she described the city was just amazing to me. It can be very easy with urban fantasy to be lazy about world building, because it's set in, well, not necessarily in our world in this case, but like it's set in something that kind of resembles our world, and it can be very easy to just be like, picture a city. That's where this is taking place. But she completely built Crescent City from the ground up and made it feel so real to me that I was just like wowed by it. That's kind of all I want to tell you guys story-wise, because there is so much intricacy to this that trying to tell you any more is just edging dangerously close into spoiler territory. I love adult fantasy, but that is a thing that I struggle with. To give someone a synopsis, you really just have to give them the barest bones of the story, because as soon as you start going into any kind of detail, you are going to hit spoilers, and I really don't want to spoil this book for you guys because it was such a special experience to read it. As for characters, I didn't connect with the characters in this the same way that I've connected with the characters in her other two series, but that didn't mean that it brought me any less enjoyment. On an intellectual level, I loved this equally as much as I love Throne of Glass and as I love ACOTAR, and on an intellectual level I think that it's better. It's like, obviously she's growing as a writer and she's growing as a storyteller and she's growing as the world builder, and on like an intellectual level I think that this is a better book than we've ever seen from her. I think that this is the best book that she's ever written. On an emotional level, it didn't impact me the same way that Throne of Glass or ACOTAR did, but I still love it immensely. I just didn't have that same intense connection with the characters, but I still, like, I love them so much. It's not quite the same for me, and that's okay. Like, I'm not expecting to ever really connect with characters again the same way that I connected with the Night Court or with Aelin and the Cadre. Like, I would be shocked if even Sarah J Maas was able to replicate that for me or exceed that for me. So I think she did a really great job with the characters in this. Bryce is very unlike Feyre or Aelin. I mean, she's got the typical Sarah J Maas heroine characteristics, you know, she's super feisty, she knows what she wants, she knows who she is, she doesn't take anyone's shit. She also has severe mental health issues, you know, it's very clear that she's suffering from PTSD, it's very clear that she is suffering from some form of depression, but she's trying, she goes out and she lives her life every day, and she's making an effort to be part of the world, even though she has, like, zero desire to live. She is such a strong character in all the ways that matter, so I thought she was great. Hunt is everything a Sarah J Maas love interest is. If you don't normally like her love interests, you are not gonna like this book. If you don't like the way that she does romance, you are going to hate the romance in this book. Don't think that it's suddenly going to be fixed because it's adult. He is very territorial, he is very broody, he is very, like, aggressive but gentle. I love him. He's like if you took Rowan and put him on brooding steroids, you would get Hunt. He is, he's intense. He has a very, very tragic history. He's everything that we love about Sarah J Maas men. Then there are some secondary characters as well who I just loved. Then we have Rune. I loved Rune. I am very excited to see where his character goes in the second book. I think that he's going to start playing more of a role, and I'm really excited for that because I think that he's great, and I think that there's a lot of potential for a very interesting story there. I think he also has a budding romance, which I am greatly enjoying, and I think is going to be a good time when it's explored more in the second book. He's quite arrogant, quite cocky, but very fun, probably would be great fun to hang around with. He reminds me a bit of Cassian. I'm very excited to see where his character goes. I'm also very excited to see where Isaiah's character goes. He's one of the Archangels, and I spent much of the book trying to decide if I didn't like him or, like, desperately really liked him. He's definitely got, like, a secret side to him, which when it gets exposed to us is going to be, I think, very interesting and make for some very compelling reading, and I'm really hoping that he gets a bit more page time in the next book. Then we can't talk about a Sarah J Maas book without talking about the romance. Oh boy. Once again, I'm going to say, if you do not like Sarah J Maas books normally, don't read this expecting to like it, because you will not like it. Because if you don't like Sarah J Maas for all the things that make her her, angsty, smutty romance, very alpha male type characters, you are not going to like this book. On that note, let's get into the romance. So because, once again, I didn't have the same kind of emotional connection to these characters as I've had to some of her other characters, I didn't have the same kind of emotional investment in the romance as I've had to some other ships. That being said though, I still loved it. It was still very intense, it was still very steamy, it was still painful to read because the sexual tension was glorious. You just feel like you're intruding on it. That was how every interaction between these two felt, and again, also because you were inside both of their minds and you could see what both of them were thinking, it was doubly frustrating because you could tell how much they both wanted each other and weren't prepared to give in, or one of them would finally decide to give in and then that was when the other one decided to be noble, and you would be in kind of both of their heads at the same time knowing how much they wanted each other. but that they weren't doing anything about it, and it just too much. I always say I like slow burn, but then I read true slow burn like this and I'm just like, holy hell, I cannot, I am going to die. Every time his wing brushed her, I exploded. There was so much chemistry between them and so much tension between them. Every little touch, every glance was so charged with lust and desire, much like, I think this is the best book that she's ever written. I think this is the best romance she's ever written. Not my favourite, but the best. Just the build and build and build, and constantly expecting a release and never getting it was a whole ride. She's so good. She's so good at what she does. Don't read this book if you are not prepared for a whole world of torture when it comes to insanely angsty romance. I'm getting tense just thinking about it because I was wound up like a little bundle of nerves the whole time I was reading this book, because it just made me more and more and more tense. Not just the romance, the story too. This book was just like a ride for my anxiety. Not a fun one, but so good. And the primary love story in this wasn't the only good one. There's a secondary romance that I am really hoping is going to be explored in book 2 that I am obsessed with. It's like nothing's even really started except for kind of flirting. I'm really hoping that that gets explored because I think that's going to be a really lovely, sweet romance. I just want to say one more thing about like the world building, is that it feels like a high fantasy even though it's an urban fantasy. So with like the complexity of the world and the intensity and like how well it's been constructed, it feels like high fantasy, but then they have cell phones and they have TVs and they have cars, and they play this game called Sunball, which seems to be based on baseball, and it feels very like our real world, but also feels so far removed from it, and that balance and that dichotomy is just like, it blew my mind how well constructed the world was. And the fact that they had things like social media and cell phones just added this other layer to their relationship that I loved. Like, they just continuously would take pictures of each other, and that for me was such a great way of seeing how their relationship was developing, even when they weren't prepared to admit it. So they wouldn't admit to themselves that they were kind of falling for each other, but also would be taking more and more and more pictures of each other. Like, you don't take pictures of someone because you don't want to commemorate the time that you're spending with them, and you don't want to commemorate the time that you're spending with someone if you don't feel something for them. So that was just another little thing about it that I loved and adored. And once again, this has not been a good, analytical, well-structured, well-broken down review. This has just been me rambling, probably incoherently, about how much I love Sarah J Maas for like half an hour, and you know what? I'm okay with that. This is my brand. I've accepted it. Seems you guys have too. So I hope that you enjoyed this. If you did, then please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you are new. I feel like there's plenty more that I could have said and should have said about this book, and honestly, as I'm watching this back and trying to edit it, I'm probably going to kick myself for all of the stuff that I've left out. But once again, this is my brand and we're sticking with it. So thank you again for watching. My battery is dying, so I will see you guys again very soon. Bye!
My life is grounded in